Welcome back to the Disrupt Education podcast. Allie Privet, Peter Hostrassler. Allie, what's going on? Wow, last week was a mind blow. I love it.
It literally was the most meta conversation we have yet to have on the podcast. And what I'm talking about is we had the educational disruptor, Kevin Fleming, on the Disrupt Education podcast. It doesn't get more synergistic than that.
Yeah.
If you,
Yeah.
if you, I mean, you have to. This is not like oh, we whimsically are telling you like go back and listen to the episode. Like this is the episode you will be inspired, motivated, like brimming from ear to ear with like wanting to disrupt education in a way that can work for you. Like that, it was so encouraging because I feel like Kevin opened the door and windows and everything to make disrupting education possible.
Yeah.
Like it was so crystal clear in my mind. I'm like, if I was working in a school right now, I'd be so encouraged by just that. And so kudos to Kevin for like being a motivational speaker everywhere he goes, I feel like.
Right.
he, we didn't pay him, people. Like he came, like just talk to us with his own time. He's obvious, he's just so passionate about the work that he does. And it makes it so easy and accessible to think I can do it too. That's what I loved about the conversation.
Totally. I listened to the podcast and kind of rehashing some things, and I know we had some of these conversations pre and post podcast. Boy, if we could record that, we should probably just record some of those off on the side and just, it's those are great conversations too, but we're pretty authentic here. I constantly thought about our own journey. As an educator, you do feel so, I mean, he hit it right on the head. You feel so like isolated and you're like, are there other people, thinking this way? Come on, there's got to be somebody, blah, blah, blah. And for a long time, I think it was few and far between, or there weren't spaces for people to meet up and really have deep conversations about ways to turn this Titanic ship away from the traditional one and done, everybody go to college iceberg and try to, realign some things. And, over my career, it was just super humbling to hear that, I feel like that, with Scott Carr, with Christy Valesky, with now Kevin Fleming, and more coming, that we really are now a force of good, a force of people who are really who are going to and are making change. And for me, that was just so humbling, just listening to Kevin speak about, the pathways and the things, just unpacking everything that was in a disruptor's mind. It was brilliant. It was a brilliant conversation. What are some of the key takeaways like you want to rehash on that one?
So right, we've had this conversation before of like, is it better to start at the bottom and work your way up, or start at the top with like policy and work your way down, or even like top of a school district and work your way down? We've had this kind of like oscillating conversation, and people have given us different perspectives. We've had just different perspectives over the years. And Kevin really talked about how you need both. Like you need to go both directions. And then he also, I loved what he said about like an external agitator and inside champions. Like in that, in order to disrupt education, you have to have people in the system that are feeling like this isn't working and we need to change. But as he said, he worked his way all the way up to the top leadership team, and he found that he couldn't make the changes that he wanted to. But from the outside with the leaders, there has been more movement. And so like more educational partnerships and more companies and organizations like Catapult that are bringing the voices and the expertise together in order to make changes not by the dozens, he said, but by the hundreds and by the thousands. And I'm sure it's going to be the tens of thousands and the hundreds of thousands and the millions. Like, what a dream to like think about. And I'm projecting that with Kevin's work because it is possible. And
Mhm.
there are more and more people that are having the thought, like, I want to make a change. And before, maybe 5, 10 years ago, you do some research and you wouldn't find a community. You'd find these isolated programs and everything. But the more this podcast goes on and the more people that we talk to, the bigger the network and the more organizations we're finding are doing different types of work. And it's like it's coming to a coalescence is
Mhm.
what I'm starting to see.
Yeah.
Even the guests that we're having on this series, okay, we did not realize they were so interconnected. It
Right.
was like I've read this book. Peter's like, I've read this book. I want to talk to this person. I've heard about this person. I want to talk to them. And then we're like didn't doing like work together as well as their own individual work. And we have even more people coming that are in this bigger network. And I haven't felt that yet in what we are talking about. And now even past guests that we've talked to are connected with
Mhm.
Catapult and the work that they're doing. Like I'm just like, what? And so I feel like now if I was a teacher feeling like, how do I make change? This isn't working. I I I would hope that it would be easy to find a community and groups and organizations to partner with.
Mhm.
So that was like my biggest takeaway from the podcast is that like the it it is getting easier
Right.
to make changes. There are more champions
Mhm.
externally, and there are more people inside the system that are wanting those changes. So those two things coming together, I think, is where we're going to see. I know I said that
Mhm.
disrupting education isn't like dropping a bomb, but in some ways it is going to be this explosion. Like there's going to be an inversion point where we are going to start seeing, I think, bigger and faster
Yep.
disruptions, like as we move through. At least I'm optimistic about it.
Right.
Probably from the high of Kevin motivating me and making me see how the picture can happen.
Mhm.
So those were some of mine. What were some of yours?
Yeah, so two things I want to unpack. I think one of them was the fact in that conversation, the highlight of things that are changing. I think so. A lot of times, I still go back into the beginning of the podcast and where I was asking students, tell us what's wrong with schools. And they would provide some answers. Or we should do it like this, or we should do it like that. A lot of it is actually coming through. I was at through to fruition. Is where states and Kevin said that are actually creating these pieces of graduate requirements or pathways that students can take that are actually good. They're beyond the traditional kind of going to 4 years of college. They're helping students create skills, portfolios. There's all these different things that are there, and he let us know that. I think sometimes, especially as 8 years ago, 9 years ago, when I started this journey, you're so down and you're so angry and you just want to punch the wall or punch through a wall to get to something, and it's a process. However, those successes, so those are big successes, but they're built on small successes. So that was one thing that I really wanted to unpack. The other thing, and before I say this, I do want to make sure to our listeners that we're not paid by anybody but to have a master class for an individual without your school, I would have thrived with that years ago. I would have jumped in and said, "All right, I can't find anybody around me who is doing this work, but here's something that I can go in solo and then start working with teams of people across the United States, the world for that matter." That those two things, I mean, we're talking now about how we change and what can we do, and that's what this whole series is about, right, Allie? It's really about you want to change, here it is. And, with Scott, Christy, David, whoops, did I throw one out there? Kevin, with all these different people, like, they're helping put change in action. The the last thing, I guess I have three things I want to unpack, is that what Kevin said was, and it's so true, this is not easy work. Right? You gotta be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We can unpack that all day, Allie. But you have to be uncomfortable. You will get pushback. There will be naysayers, but if you stick with the people who are the visionaries, the growth mindset peeps in this, I mean, I think in our journey together, like, we've seen movement. So, I mean, I I just love his enthusiasm and the way that he eloquently put that.
Definitely. And I love that he said, that he tries to approach change from different angles. He mentioned programs, policy, people,
Mhm.
metrics, and mindset. But where he starts and how we even got to this series was he starts with like metrics and mindset, specifically mindset.
Mhm.
We did a whole summer series on mindset in order to prepare all of you for this fall series of like getting into the work and like what does it look like and
Mhm.
who are these people that are doing this work. But if your mindset is not ready to make change, you're going to fight against it. And we've heard that time and time
Mhm.
again
Mhm.
from people who have been like, yes, I had to push against this for X amount of time. And, like it took much longer than I thought. And I had to overcome this that I didn't anticipate. Like we've had tons of stories like that. But their mindset was determined and they were like, I am going to make a change. And, the red tape won't matter if
Mhm.
your mindset is right. Like, and, you know, the other thing that is just, it's so encouraging to hear,
Mhm.
is that the state and federal policies are changing. And like, what a relief if you're in education to know that like it could be down the pipeline. Like, more is like there is a snowball effect. Like, as more success stories come out from doing quote unquote education differently, then other states and other policymakers are more inclined to do those things and more inclined to fund those types of alternative programs. And so I just really resonated with um, Kevin talking about like school counselors
Mhm.
and how, like, if you're a school counselor, you probably went through the system, the traditional system, the one way to win the system, and you might not have had a lot of different opportunities to no fault of your own that you
Mhm.
just like care about kids and you want to help them and counsel them in school and about on their path. Well, if you were a counselor listening to Kevin, I feel like so much weight would have come off your shoulders. Even if you didn't have all that experience, you would feel like, wow, I don't need to direct kids into the path that I went on. Like, there are other options. And I think just being able to have that conversation with your frontline counselors and teachers and be like, we can encourage enlistment.
Mhm.
We haven't heard that on the podcast. Well, at least I haven't. Like, right? Or we can encourage earn and learn. We
Mhm.
can encourage employment. We can encourage, oh, wait, we're already really good at encouraging enrollment into college. So maybe we can tone that down. Like, how encouraging would that be to like just you're sitting in a counselor's office and they just want to get to know you so that they could encourage you in whatever route you might be considering. Not like you sit down in the counselor's office and, well, what college are you thinking about
Mhm.
attending? Have you applied? Do you know about the FAFSA? Like, those were the conversations I remember having with counselors. And again, no fault. That is the system they are in. But like, what a relief to be able to be like, what interests you? And
Mhm.
then like have programs and people to direct them to that. but the people have to be on board. Their mindset has to be on board for that to even start to change.
Right. I really like the question you asked there. What I heard you say is what interests you, right? That's a question that is evolving in education, and I really like that question because you're going to get an answer even if you don't get an answer. You know what I'm saying? So like, and I really enjoy asking students at the high school level that question. What do what interests you? And that makes them stop and think. And some kids will be like, they'll rattle off three or four things, and some kids are like, I'm not really sure. And I'm like, well, let's build some experiences, right? And that's, that's a whole nother rabbit hole we didn't get down in with Kevin because, especially in redefining the goal, there's a lot of solution-minded ways that people can really, help youth and even that 23, 24-year-old counselor like to understand how we can change these things. And that's something that I really enjoy doing is changing the narrative slightly. Because the narrative it's words, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
something that I've been pretty intent on when you're talking to youth, so what's next for you? Not what college are you going to? Just changing those little pieces. And I think that kind of goes along with what Kevin was saying, and we've been saying is these little itty bitty pieces can make a major difference, right? A just slight refocus. Um, and then you constantly it's kind of self-talk, right? So I'm not sure. Okay, kids, like, I'm not sure. Okay, good. Then now I have another starting point for you. So, how can we help you become a little bit more confident about that?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the conversations rather than I think I, as the educator, as the authoritarian on learning, you can or you could go this route or you should go this route. It's now just transferring that to a with like so help me help you how can he work with you to get to where you want to go? Well, first thing is find out where you want to go. Who are you? What are your skills? What do you like? What are you good at? What do you excel at? It's interesting because if you look in, he's got tons of charts in his book. I love it. I'm a visual guy. And one of the charts is like school just didn't, it's boring. That's one of the highest reasons students drop out. It wasn't relevant to me. No one knows who I am, kind of thing. Like no one asks me, what I'm interested in, right? Because we built everybody into this forward path. So just little things like that. I mean, this is just one little piece out of that conversation we had last week where I'm, constantly trying to figure out, okay, what else? How else can we make this better for the entire system? And I know, we've had this conversation before on this kind of piece. And then also, I mean, we can go all the way back to Peppo. I mean, I love the guy crushing it. It's like, how do we make it better? And then those obstacles start to fall away really quickly when you go into that. And that was like how Peppo just launched us into crushing it. And now, we're here, Catapult is a place, CISA 2 with Scott Carr, uh, work-based learning here by I got them all right here. You'd think I have a whole library for those watching. Christy Valesky's work-based learning. These are all things that people can go in. I don't care if you're teaching math, science, English, art, music, whatever. You can apply these things and these your people of disrupting education to all that. That's what I love about this series, Ali, is just we're getting people together and really they are helping you make a move.
Exactly. I mean, these are the change makers. They're here on the podcast. They are out disrupting education day in and day out. And we're just lucky to share, little nuggets of their experience here on the podcast. Because I mean, it's like eh, for the last like when we started this series, every single episode, I'm like, we need to have a part two. Like, well, there's always so much that we want to keep asking these guests
Hmm.
because they have such a depth to their work that it might be like round two if we can get even half of them back to have more conversations, because this is like the front lines, in my opinion, of disruption. And it's really, really exciting to have these conversations and to be able to just put them as far and wide as our listeners span. And like, if this is encouraging to you, please share them out. Like,
Hmm.
you know, the podcast is meant to be shared and is meant to like help those that, maybe are feeling alone, and and to connect with other like-minded people. All of these people are so open and they want to connect and have conversations. Like, if you please reach out to them. They said it on the episodes, and all of our guests pretty much say that. They're like, oh yeah, if you want,
Hmm.
if you want to talk, just message me or find me on this platform. Everybody's a little different. Often people give their emails or phone numbers.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
it's like such a cool network of really awesome people that
Mhm.
clearly love what they do. And I think, even when I think about like education and being in a school building, the best rooms I ever was in rooms where people loved what they did.
Mm.
It didn't matter if it was like, I just love math, or I really love music, or
Mhm.
I really feel passionate about being the nurse in the building, or the custodian, or whatever the role was. When people were there because they weren't burnt out and they weren't just waiting for retirement, like that was when I felt like the most innovation, the most disruption, the most change was possible. And there are people like that in every building.
Mhm.
They may not know it. And so the work that Catapult's doing to bring those people together and make you feel like you can make changes, even if it's just one step. I love that
Yeah.
Kevin said, he's like, even if you can just make one or two changes, well,
Mhm.
guess what? You are paving the path for someone else to come, and maybe they can get five or six.
Mhm.
So it's like, don't think that the what you're doing is too small. That was the biggest takeaway for me, is that like disrupting education, it might seem like, oh, just changing the verbiage of how you talk to students and how you encourage them about what's the next step, and maybe putting some quote unquote non-traditional routes out there, which is like crazy. It seems like so simple. Like literally just the verbiage you use. You don't have to change your funding. You don't have to get a grant for this. You could, yes, you have to drip feed, but like you could have professional development days where you're just encouraging those in the building to word things other than go to college. Like,
Mhm.
I feel like the stakes are pretty low in terms of like like something that could really make a big change, but like doesn't take a lot of effort,
Right.
right? I
Yeah.
was like sitting there thinking, how transformational could that be? All it is words. It's really very little, like any kind of, I don't think it's some drastic, you're going to need a manuscript and you're going to have to like figure out like what to do. That it's just different conversations. And if you just give people a simple 5 E's or something to look, just ask them if they want to be employed, enlist, earn and learn, enroll. Like, I don't see how that would be difficult to implement, but
Right.
could have a drastic culture change in education.
Yeah.
And we're not even talking changing curriculum or time or anything like that.
Mhm. Mhm. And I'm going to go to there. I've been in this business long enough to see two types. I'm going to go to two people who retired, and in their last year, both wonderful educators. I don't want to take anything away from them, but both had very different exits. And one, I remember this person's last year, he told me, I wish I did more of the stuff of what you're doing, pushing back and he was legitimate and he was amazing educator, and changed hundreds and thousands of lives, right? But when he said that, I felt a little like, ah, man, because he's such a good educator, yet if he pushed and did some different, small things and kind of stood up against, just the one size fits all piece, man, think about how that would have been. And the other educator, um, who was literally walked out on top of an amazing project that I was lucky enough to be a part of. I definitely did not set this thing up. And I mean, when I was part of this project, it was amazing. We worked with a large corporation, um, students, and if you go back into one of these podcasts, I'll probably revealed it somewhere, but students came in on their own on a Saturday morning to prep for a Monday meeting with this corporation, and not because they had to, because they wanted to. And this educator in his last year, I
Did
remember
that.
when we went to the corporate entity, on a field trip to do the presentation, I get teary-eyed
Mm.
because he is standing. I have a picture of it somewhere. He's standing on the side, and this is basically late April, early May. He knows this is it for him. He's retiring. And you can see it in his face. And he is like, heck yes, I am going out after I won a championship. Like, these kids came in on a Saturday, nobody grumping, Saturday morning to work in the school that we opened up for them. We were there helping them out. And to see them stand in a place where a lot of these students were never ever going to see something like that, but this changed their lives, can't beat it. And so that is what Kevin is all about, I think. That's what this podcast is all about. Just make stuff happen. It is making a difference. There always will be haters, there always will be blockers, but I would love to see that person be any one of our listeners in that picture where they didn't have to be in the picture. They didn't have to prove anything anymore. They were just like, I've hit it. This is it. 3-pointer, buzzer, it's in. And yeah, that gives me chills because I
Mhm.
got to see that. And that's the way I want to go out. So I don't know. Final
I mean,
thoughts, Ellie. What do you think?
Kevin said it on the podcast. I'm pretty sure it was on the podcast. It
Yeah.
wasn't an after before talk when he was like, there are some educators that are like, they're burnt out and they leave. And then there's
Mhm.
some educators that are like, I'm burnt out and I'm counting the years to retirement. And they
Mhm.
might be 8 years away. So much can happen in 8 years. Don't check out, please.
Right.
If you have an educator that, there's still some hope. Maybe Kevin's podcast and this podcast is what they need to get back in the game. And
Yeah.
we would love nothing more if this podcast reached one person that was like questioning whether or not they really want to disrupt education or like even continue in education. And they're like, I just don't feel like there's any hope. I can't make any change. I can't, there's nothing I can do. Uh, please send it to them. And like, if,
Right.
if we could help encourage one individual with this
Hmm.
podcast. That's why we do it. That's
Yeah.
why we record and we put out these conversations to consistently send you a message that people are out there we find them all the time. Peter and I always say we will never run out of guests. And I truly believe that because there are so many individuals.
Hmm.
We wish we could bring them on all the time,
Right.
right? We always have like so many in the
Hmm.
pipeline that we're like, oh my gosh, we really want to talk to them and this person and this person, this person. So it's like there are so many people doing the work, and that's why we continually put out episodes for you
Hmm.
so that you can be encouraged and know you're not alone, and then share it with others to encourage them, let them know they're not alone, and that real change is possible when we are unified and also like have the right mindset to make changes and realize it's not as big as we may think and out of reach as we may
Right.
think.
Right. But wait, there's more. We're not
Or
done with guests, folks. So next week we have another great guest coming up. If you follow on LinkedIn here and there, you should connect with Allie and I. You might be getting some snippets of this. But take a look. Take a look at our connects. Take a look at all the people that we've had on the podcast. Pick a few, connect, have some conversations. This is our why, and we love doing it. So yeah, I think it's a great place to wrap it up there. I hope everybody's motivated. Look, I know it's still kind of the beginning into the fall of the year. This is where, we're just stepping on the gas. Just like Peppo, we're going to continue to crush it, and look for more. So keep us on your radar, and like Ali said, just share it out. I'm telling you, just check this out. Look, I'm telling you, I was so mad. I'm still mad at education, and it's okay to be mad at education, but do something about it. And that's what disrupting education is all about. So with that, we'll wrap it up. For Ali Privet, I'm Peter Hostrasser. We want to thank you all for listening. We'll catch you next time. Guess what? We're coming back with another great guest next week. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the Disrupt Education Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
are you ready to disrupt the educational arena you're a part of? For more ways to get involved in the work we do here at Disrupt Education, check us out at disrupteducation.co or find us on LinkedIn at Peter Hostrasser or Ali Privet.
Our mission here is to help facilitate and amplify changes in the educational system through local initiatives and help you scale them into community movements. Our building network of disruptors in education are working to move beyond scores and grades as the only measure for student learning. If your school district, college, campus, or organization is looking for facilitators of this work, reach out on our website or social media.
And if you have any thoughts or feedback on this week's episode or any episode, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries, taking risks, and most importantly, disrupting education.